Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said in quite a succinct statement that ad-deen an-Nasihah, which means that the deen or the religion of Islam is Nasihah. So what does this word Nasihah mean? So Nasihah actually means to give sincere advice to somebody. So that is a pretty profound statement for the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, to make, to sum up the religion of Islam as giving sincere advice. So let's have a look and see what this Nasihah actually means. To put it in a way that makes sense to us, have you ever been told by your parents, because I know I certainly have when I was younger. I remember my mother used to say to me, I'm only telling you this for your own good. And now, as a mother to 4 children, I can hear myself saying the same thing to them. So whatever advice you give to somebody, or whatever advice is being given to you in that kind of scenario of mother-daughter or even father-son, whatever, it is said by somebody who cares for the person that they are talking to. And that is one reason why the deen is this giving of sincere advice. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that the believers are like one body, that we should be like one body, in the sense that each one of us is concerned for the well-being of the other. And if we truly care for other people, then especially our family or our friends, we would want to see every one of those people that we care for succeed, not just in this life, but we want to hope that they will be successful in the next life as well. Because we know that true success is reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from God the Most High, and that we can achieve by submitting our will to His, in other words, by obeying His command to us. And it's in this that our advice for our family, our friends, our fellow Muslims is invaluable. I guess I would say, it's a bit like when you see a child and they're behaving badly, maybe even on a regular basis, and nobody says anything about it, then you're most probably going to think to yourself, you know what? That child is going to be extremely spoiled. Well, it's the same if you see your friend or somebody in your family doing something on a regular basis that they really shouldn't be doing. And if you don't say something, then that friend or that family member or that fellow Muslim, their hereafter might be spoiled. So out of love and concern for that person, you should help them. And it goes hand in hand with wishing for your fellow Muslim brother, Muslim sister, whatever you would wish for yourself. Also, we know that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, guide one another, love one another. So when you give nasihah, when you give sincere advice to someone, then you are actually echoing the words of some of the best of the people that have ever lived, so the prophets. Because to give advice was actually the mission of all of the messengers of Allah, peace be upon them all. Because we read in the Quran where Hud, alayhi salam, Hud, may Allah be pleased with him, he said to his people, I deliver to you the message of my Lord, and I am to you a sincere advisor. Also, Shu'aib, may Allah be pleased with him, he said to his people, I delivered to you the message of my Lord, and I gave you good advice. So, okay, we've said that giving good advice is so important. But to give advice effectively, you need to know how to give advice. And we're actually given a description of this when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that had he, in other words the Prophet, been harsh or hard-hearted, then people would have just turned away from him. And you know yourself that no matter how well-meaning a person's advice is, if it's not said in the right way, you're most really just going to end up ignoring them. So to give advice effectively, it should be given with love and affection and sincerity and obviously it goes without saying, in private. Because if you speak to your friends, your family, or fellow Muslim in a way that suggests that you somehow think that you're better than them, or that you're somehow mocking them, making fun of them, or maybe even just like telling them off, then the advice that you are giving is really just going to fall on deaf ears. But then, saying that, you can't use that as an excuse. Just because you don't think the person is going to listen to you or they're going to get offended doesn't mean that you don't try your hardest to advise them in the most beautiful way possible. Because the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said the deen is to give nasihah. So we have to try and give this advice regardless of the way we think it might be received. So even more so, nasihah, this good, sincere, beautiful advice, should be offered to a person purely for the sake of Allah alone, and not for any other reason. Because it makes sense, really. If you advise somebody because you think you're going to get something out of it, then really you cannot classify that as sincere. And I know it can be off-putting to think that you might upset someone, especially someone that you care for, by the sincere advice that you give them. But it could be that although your friend doesn't look like they've appreciated being told, it does go in, and they'll mull it over, and perhaps months, even years later, they may recognize that they were grateful for your plain speaking. If you do give advice, no matter how sincere you are, there's just one thing that, I'm telling myself first, believe me, that we have to bear in mind, is that we ourselves might be wrong, and the person who you think is at fault is actually right. In which case, it's important that we don't get into a pointless argument and we realize that although we're not perfect and, okay, we're going to get judged according to our intention. And inshallah, maybe, if nothing else, we've learned something out of that scenario as well. So when we give nasihah, it acts like a reminder to a person who knew what was right, but perhaps they'd just forgotten or they weren't aware that they were making a mistake. Nobody has the ability to see themselves when they're doing something, so it's up to people that do see us to behave like our mirrors. Because the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, the believer is a mirror to another believer. When we look in the mirror, what do we look at? So most of the time, we're going to check our clothes, our hair, perhaps to see if we're dressed in appropriately when we're going out. And if we see something that is not quite right, then we change it, we rectify it. And that is a literal physical mirror. So the mirror of the Muslims, in other words, one Muslim to another, hopefully should correct, and hopefully in the best of ways, any aspect of the way that we are living, because we're all trying to live pleasing Allah. So it should correct any aspect of the way that we're living that's not quite right, it's not quite on point, and it could be better, and we could please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. Because if you love your friends, if you love your family, if you love your fellow Muslims, you should do them the kindness of pointing out their faults to them, and especially not to other people. You shouldn't be pointing out other people's faults to anyone else. And hopefully they will reciprocate in that way. And we'll see that hopefully we'll fulfill the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, you shall not attain a perfected faith until you love for others what you love for yourself. And that, I think, is beautiful, and it's very important to think about, because if you are giving advice to somebody else, how would you like advice to be given to you? So always keep in mind that you should love for other people what you love for yourself. So in other words, the way you speak to other people should be the way that you wish others would speak to you. And really, I will point out, I know from experience that giving nasihah, giving that sincere advice is far from easy. And it really does call for strength of character and patience and trusting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you to do and to help you to speak in the best way. Okay, so that's if you're the one giving the advice. But what if you are on the receiving end of nasihah, if you're on the receiving end of the sincere advice? So firstly, and again, speaking to myself, don't fall into the trap of being able to give advice, but not being able to receive it. And inshallah, if the advice is given in a truly beautiful, kind, gentle way, then really we should, I know it's hard, but we should welcome it. And one of the most beautiful things that I've read about this is where Amr, may Allah be pleased with him, one of the great companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he said, "May Allah have mercy on the one who sends me my faults as a gift." And even in English, in like an English saying, we say that, a true friend is the one who will actually tell you when you're wrong, not will just always agree with you and allow you to just go, sort of go off the rails. A true friend to you will be somebody who would explain to you caringly and lovingly that what you're doing is just harming yourself. So a few things I think as like takeaway points from this reminder is that remember, when you give advice to somebody, first of all, don't just give it off the cuff. Think about it deeply. Think about how you're going to speak to somebody. And remember that you would want somebody else to speak to you in a kind, gentle, private, sincere way. And so that should be how you speak to other people. And that it's not a good enough excuse to say, "Oh, I think I might hurt that person's feelings." Well, yeah, you might a little bit, but actually, like they say, a true friend is the one who will actually tell you when you're wrong because they want the best for you, because they want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to love you more by removing that small mistake that you're making. And, and you will love them more because they were the ones who helped you to remove that certain aspect of your character or of your life that actually deep down inside you most really knew wasn't the right way to behave anyway. And I think the thing that I'm going to really try and work on is to be more like Omar when he said that he was so happy that somebody would send him his faults as a gift. Nobody really likes their faults to be pointed out, but we have to kind of think beyond that. We have to think bigger than that and realize that if we just carry on in the way that we are, maybe with all our faults, along with us, then how are we ever going to improve as people? So, yeah, I mean, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always surrounds us with people who love us and care enough about us that they will give us that beautiful, gentle, kind, sincere advice so that we can actually be even more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Glory and praise be to you, O Allah. I bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship except you. I beg of you your forgiveness and repent to you. Ameen.